Hello, welcome to the third and final part to this tutorial series. This one's going to be very info dense as a warning, but let's get started. So this is the code we wrote in the last video, but I'm going to take some time and rewrite it in a more conventional way. So starting from the top, we've created a class variable called Santa Instance. Below, we've taken the 3 lines of code we had before and put them in its own private method. We've also added checks for each loading asset bundle line. This is because these asset bundle methods don't actually return errors if they can't load anything, they just return null. So that's why we have these lines checking if they're null. We can use the Unity Mod Manager logger to tell us if stuff didn't load, and using return stops the game from running the rest of the code. And lastly, instead of instantiating the object on the spot, we just assign it to our class variable instead. Before I explain up here, I'm going to make a few more changes. So this first line of code I wrote will write everything inside its brackets when F1 is hit on the keyboard. By calling our asset bundle spawner method this way, we can tell it to run all the code when this line of code is run, but to avoid having it run multiple times, we're just going to check if it has been run before. And the way we can do this is just checking if the Santa instance game object has been assigned something, and if it hasn't, we want it to run. If not, it's going to skip that block. So this one method is what everything in this class is built for, but we want to make sure this one method will get called by the game. To do that, we're going to call it inside our onToggle method, and our onToggle method will get called by the load method, and that load method is what's going to get called by the Unity Mod Manager once the game is up and running. But wait a minute, some of you may be looking at this and think, we haven't solved the problem that we had at the beginning of the second video. It's still going to try and run this code while the game's first loading and there's no scene to load it into. And no one's going to be hitting F1 in the first few frames of a loading screen. If only there were a way for a mod to wait until F1 has been pressed for everything to happen. So what we have to have is a method that will check every frame whether or not F1 is being hit. And there are 2 ways we can accomplish this. The first is to use the onUpdate entry method with Unity Mod Manager, but I don't really like doing it that way. I'm going to show you the second way and how I like to do it. First, we're going to start off by making a whole new class, and we're actually going to build this class like a default Unity C# class. This is a script that's going to be attached to an object that we're going to make inside the game, so that way any code we put inside this update loop will be run every frame of the game. Instead of checking for F1 inside my createSantaGo game object method, I'm going to check for it inside my new update script. And then I'm going to call said method from here once F1 has been hit. I'm also going to have Unity Mod Manager print this line, so if I see it in the logger, I know everything worked. And believe it or not, we have one more piece of code to write. And just to add one last twist to this, in order for there to be an object that can run the code to create Santa, we have to run code that can create the object that can create Santa, and that's what this method does. This first line of code creates a new game object with this name. The second line adds the script we just wrote to that game object. And this third line is probably the most important. By default, Unity will destroy object when it loads new scenes or in SkaterXL new levels. So by running this line, we're telling Unity to never delete this object unless the game is quit altogether. This new createSantaSpawner game object method is what we're going to call in our onToggle method now too. So we are very, very close to being done with this mod. There's just one more thing we have to do. The very last thing we have to do is make a new JSON file on our project, and we have to call it info with a capital I in everything. This is the file that Unity Mod Manager will look for, and I will explain why in just a minute. So this is what I have. I copied this from an old project. It's probably best that you just either clone this entire repository from my GitHub or just download the files and change what you need, because everything has to be spelled the exact same way as I have it. Also, make sure you absolutely triple check these bottom 2 lines here. If you don't get the spelling or capitalization of the assembly name or the load method right, then you're just going to be not able to troubleshoot anything because just nothing's going to happen. Hello, me from the future for one last time. Just for the tutorial's sake, I'm going to quickly flash all the classes on the screen, and I've also gone ahead and simplified some of them down just so you know exactly the minimum amount of code you need to get everything working and so you're not confused. So now I can come up here to build and select build SXL Santa Mod. Assuming you don't get any build errors, it'll actually show you where to find your assembly file once it's been made. And when we go to find our file in that location, we can see that it's also rebuilt every single dependency that our assembly needs. For our mod and Unity Mod Manager's sake though, we only need the DLL that we wrote ourselves. What we're going to do is make our new folder that we can call anything, but you should probably call it after the mod. And we're going to put just our DLL in there and the info.json file. Then we're going to zip it up and install it with Unity Mod Manager. So now we are in the game, and Unity Mod Manager will show a window of all the mods we have, and you should see your mod in there. Its status is active, so that looks good. Let's switch over to the Logs tab. So I'm going to keep this open and hit F1, and we see our successful ho 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 come through, and we can also see Santa has popped up in the distance. We didn't really specify where he should pop up, so he's going to spawn at every map's 000 point. If Santa doesn't appear, or whatever mod you're doing, and you get something like my loaded asset bundle didn't load, then I would double check to make sure that your loaded asset bundle is in the right folder location, or that your path string inside your code is correct. Or if you get something like my prefab didn't load, then I would just make sure, triple check that everything's spelled correctly and that everything inside your asset bundle is named correctly. This one step right here of seeing if everything works inside your game or not can be the most frustrating and unnerving step of the entire project. And I have spent weeks in a position where I've written all the code and it just doesn't work and I don't know why. So do not get discouraged. It's gonna happen to you, and don't give up if it does, because you're very, very close. So this is the end of the tutorial, but if you did in fact want to add custom behavior to whatever object you spawned inside the game, this is how you do it. So this script is going to make whatever object it's attached to look directly at the main camera in the scene, and then once it's found that main camera, it's going to start moving towards it at this rate. And then back over in our manager script, just make sure you attach it to the game object after it's been instantiated. Then it's just a case of simply rebuilding it. You actually don't even have to go through all the steps of reinstalling it with the mod manager. You can just find it at around this file path and just replace it directly. There you go. Hopefully this tutorial opens some doors for you in terms of modding any Unity game, but specifically Skater XL. And if you don't consider this mod art, well, then I personally feel sorry for you. So one very, very last tip, if you did do a mod in this format and wanted to put it on mod.io, everything would have to fit inside one compressed folder, and you'd want to put your asset bundle inside that folder. This is how you can find it on anyone's computer using code, so long as it stays inside the same folder as your DLL.